Hey everybody, Charles here. Welcome to a very special episode of the Mindfully Masculine podcast titled Will Smith, Mindless or Masculine? Dan and I are going to discuss what happened last night at the Academy Awards where Will Smith smacked Chris Rock after Chris told a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett's haircut. And we'll explore that and share our opinions. Hope you enjoy the episode, and if you have any feedback or questions, please send us a message at mindfullymasculine@gmail.com. Thanks. Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit our website at mindfullymasculine.com. And to interact with us, our guests, and your fellow listeners, join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How we doing?
I'm great.
Yeah.
As I start off with my filler word.
I'm pretty good. It's been a crazy morning already. And so we're recording this on March 28th, Monday morning, the morning after the Academy Awards. And the thing everybody's talking about is Will Smith smacking Chris Rock in the face after Chris Rock made a joke about his wife's hair.
Yeah.
And so you and I have both watched the clip and a little bit of online commentary about what happened. I've had some conversations already this morning with people on text and instant messenger about what happened, and discuss some celebrities and other and other people's takes on what happened. And I thought for the kind of podcast that we want to do and what we find interesting and important, we should probably, what could make the argument? No, enough people have weighed in already, but you know what, we've got some opinions too. So we got to eat too. Come on, exactly. We gotta be heard, and let's put it out there. So first, I guess the first question is, do you think it was fake, staged, or do you think it was real? I think it was real.
I think it was real after watching the clip closely, looking at Chris Rock's reaction, looking at Will Smith's the anger in his eyes as he shouted at him from his seat. Yeah. That he was not. Will Smith's a great actor. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like right. I like all of his movies. But that was different. That wasn't acting.
I think he definitely
was legit.
I think he was definitely angry, and right in the moment of the joke, he didn't look angry, but he got angry, which I completely identify with that. Sometimes when something shocking hits you, your initial reaction isn't the reaction that sort of makes its home in your gut, you know?
Mm-hmm. Now,
go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, the initial clip showed Will Smith laughing at the comment.
Correct. Yeah.
So do you think that it was, he didn't realize it actually hurt Jada until she gave him the look, and at that point it triggered him?
Maybe, because
the woman he loves was hurt.
Right. Maybe maybe he just had an instant reaction of, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. This feels weird, but I don't know what my emotion is. So, maybe he's
a default. Maybe
he's a nervous laugher. I sure am a nervous laugher. I mean, when something happens that I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to feel about it, my impulse can often be to, have a smile and have a chuckle. And then like, oh man, this is not what it felt like initially. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which of the two it was. It could be that her reaction is what changed his opinion of what just happened. But it was wild to see. I did not watch it live. I woke up sort of later in the evening after the Oscars was already over. It just, all these people were commenting on it, and I'm thinking, man, what's going on? And then I looked for some video, and it's like, yeah, this is a big deal. This is really going to, this is going to be what people talk about, certainly today and maybe for the next couple days.
Yeah. In terms of the joke itself, you've done some stand up, and you're very well versed in terms of your experience with comedy, and you've been I know a fan for almost your whole life, and I have too. I mean, I haven't taken it to the level that you have for sure, but you know, you've done some writing and things like that as well. So I'm curious, your take on that joke. Was it out of line?
Yeah. So I was just sharing with someone this morning, I am definitely a believer in the idea that one can quote unquote joke about anything. And you just need to be ready for some consequences when you joke about things that are going to likely make some of your audience upset. Right.
Interesting. Okay.
But the interesting, the principle that I've heard that seems like it makes sense to me is the best jokes are when you make fun of things that people do, not things that people are. So go after somebody for the choices that they make and, the behaviors that they exhibit. But when it comes to, joking about someone because of the way they're born or an illness that has come upon them through no act of their own, those typically aren't going to feel as funny to me as making fun of choices that people make and decisions that people make. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, wasn't it Jada's decision and choice to shave her head
as a result of her alopecia?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's not. Yeah. That was her choice to do that. Not everybody who has alopecia shaves their head. That's true. It doesn't give you, having alopecia does not result in a shaved head.
That's fair.
Right. And I mean, I would assume that some people wear wigs and some people, right. And
some people wear wigs and some people just
let it go
kind of
and
patchy. Yeah.
Right. So that being said, does that change anything in your opinion?
That's interesting. That's a take I did not see coming. So thanks for making me think about it in that way. I guess one could offer the same opinion on somebody that shaves their head because they're going through chemotherapy and they don't want, so as a joke about their shaved head, is a joke about her shaved head different than a joke about her alopecia? Is a joke about somebody going through chemo and their shaved head, is that different than just making a joke about them having cancer?
I think it is. It might be a little bit subtle and it might be difficult to distinguish between the two, but like in this case, Chris Rock wasn't making fun of people with alopecia because not everybody with alopecia shaves their head. Lots of people, right? So I think I think that's kind of, and he makes that comment in terms of before Will Smith came up there and he said, okay, could have been a lot worse, or, we're all good. Let's kind of move forward kind of thing.
I don't know if he gets to be the one to make that call though. You know what I mean? Like,
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think
saying that was a nice one. I mean, as a comic, you don't really get to throw that out there to undo.
However, I think in terms of the type of jokes that Chris Rock is capable of and has shown in public, that was a nice one compared to some of his other stuff, right? I mean, would you agree with that?
I don't see him as really being known for somebody who goes after specific people with his jokes. I mean, he says some mean jokes as a commentary on society, and he can get mean, but when going after a particular individual doesn't really seem like Chris Rock's kind of his bit.
That's fair. Okay.
And I should also point out the idea of, make fun of them for what they do, not for what they are. He was the first one that I heard say that back on the Talking Funny special that he did with Louis C.K., Ricky Gervais, and Jerry Seinfeld. Like I hadn't really been exposed to that idea before he was the one that made that comment on that HBO special.
So that being said, do you feel like that lines up in this case, that he was making fun of what she did and not what she has or who she is?
Interesting. I don't think so. I am not having an easy time separating her decision to shave her head from an unfortunate thing that happened to her. I kind of see those as being not quite the same, but real close to the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, and then the next question is, okay, well, when you make a joke that somebody determines it's tasteless, do you deserve to get slapped over it? And for me, the answer to that's a fairly resounding no. Just because of where I stand on the non-aggression principle and the idea that initiating violence against another human is a wrong thing to do, whether and you and I have had disagreements about that. I feel that's the case even when you're talking about disciplining your kids. Like being the first one to strike someone else, I think, is inexcusable in every case, and this would certainly fall under that. However, there's also there's a lot of components when it comes to the demographics of the people involved that make me feel like I may not be getting everything that's going into this. Now, again, that doesn't stop me from holding the opinion of slapping people's the wrong thing to do. But here's a couple things. Number one, all three people involved are Black, and you and I clearly are not. So I'm not saying that gives me no right to have an opinion on it, but the idea of what Black women go through when it comes to their hair is not an experience that I'm intimately familiar with. Like, there are some workplaces, for example, until recently and maybe still, where typical hairstyles adopted by Black women were not allowed because they were judged as being unprofessional. Things like afros, dreadlocks, stuff like that.
Okay.
Were determined, like, you can't wear your hair this way because we've decided that it's unprofessional, even though, it's pretty.
Okay. Well, let's go down that road, because the first job that I had after college was, I'm not allowed to wear jeans unless it's Friday. Because why? Because if you're going to be at a customer site, that's unprofessional.
Right.
Now, that was an opinion of a privately owned company, an owner of a privately owned company. So what's the difference between that and, a hairstyle that they don't like? I mean, same thing. Like, I mean, if I had, if I came in with like this big mangly beard or whatever, I know this guy, and he'd be like, you need to shave that, or you need to trim that up, or whatever that is. And it's his business, and it's my choice whether I want to work there or not.
It is. I agree. And I'm not going to minimize the liberty of private individuals to choose who they associate with and what standards they set for their uniforms and things like that. But when something is pretty targeted toward a certain group and a certain group's culture that they had in place long before you started your company, I also think it's fair to get some judgment and criticism if your policies just happen to target a certain group at a much, much higher level than it targets another one.
Right. And just as the way they, there are consequences for those decisions that they make. Right. So same thing, right? Like, I may not want to work at that guy's place. I didn't want to stick around because I didn't feel like wearing pants and a button down, 4 out of 5 days a week. You know what I'm saying? So, but that, at that point, I guess, everybody has a right to criticize and not do business with this company that is requiring these things. Absolutely. Yeah.
And to say your hairstyle policy is negatively impacting one particular group far more than any other group. And I think that's kind of shitty. I think that's a fair opinion to have. And, going an additional step to saying, and the government should come in and padlock your business because of how shitty it is. That's another step that I don't know if I'm comfortable. I know that I'm not comfortable just signing on to carte blanche,
Definitely not. That's
so. Yeah. So that's one factor. Again, the fact that that has been an issue, and that's something that I'm sure she feels in her bones when people say anything to her about her hair. The other thing is, all three of these people are professional entertainers, and in her case, the necessity of the marketplace to find her as beautiful and attractive determines the kind of roles she's going to be offered and the kind of money she can make in those roles. Mm-hmm. So another reason that Will Smith could have had an over-the-top reaction to it is, okay, if he's going on this huge stage, where Chris Rock's joke is being heard and seen by millions and millions of people, that could have a real impact on the future of their family. Now, do we feel sorry for the millionaires because maybe she won't make as many millions on her next role as she did in previous ones? I don't know, but it's if I was the head of that family, that would certainly be something that went through my mind and I probably wouldn't feel good about.
Sure. And then knowing that you were going to go up there and, well, actually, no, he didn't know he was going to win. Right. So he didn't know if he was going to get he didn't know if he was going to get a chance to speak.
Okay. Welcome back after those technical difficulties, Dan. Do you remember, you were the one talking. Do you remember where we were at?
I do not actually. Okay, yeah.
So we talked about how I'm having trouble completely identifying with the situation because these people are obviously different from me, but I don't think that stops me from having a considered opinion. I hope not. I hope nobody, thinks that because I'm not black or a multimillionaire or an actor, I don't get to have an opinion.
Oh yeah. I think we were talking about it potentially impacting revenue.
Yeah, that's right.
Forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And how that can, look, when people attack your livelihood or you feel like your livelihood is being attacked, obviously that's a situation that you're going to react to in a very strong and passionate way. You could also make the argument that all three of their profiles are going to be ridiculously upsized because of what happened, and that we're going to be everybody's talking about it. The other thing is, I've seen a lot of people. I wonder, when I was younger, I think the answer to this is a resounding yes, which bums me out a little bit. A year ago, I would have had a completely decisive, resounding opinion on what happened, and I would not have been able to see anybody else's perspective or viewpoint on this. And I would have been like, this is the right answer, and that's the way it is. And now I'm going to get on my dumb podcast and yell about it, and I'm going to expect everyone to agree with me or they're dumb. Where now, look, I've been in a position where a woman I cared about has been insulted, and I know what that rage does. And it's not completely chivalrous and completely graceful. A big part of it is, how dare they insult my woman? And I wonder how much of that Will Smith was experiencing. Not just, I'm looking at her, she feels bad about it, she feels insulted, but also, who does he think he is speaking that way about my woman? And so part of me wonders how much of his reaction was performative because he felt slighted himself that someone would slight his wife.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Because I think that that is not a very virtuous reaction to have, but I know that I felt that way before, and I've got to be honest about that.
Yep. Yeah, but I feel like yeah, the issue here is, I feel, I'm having audio issues, dude. Something's going on with my mic. Sorry, hold on a second. I don't know why. Bear with me a second here.
My impulse is to blame your 2007 Apple earbuds, obviously.
I'm actually going to pause the recording. Hang on.
Okay, so judging from our technical difficulties, I don't think the Scientologists want us to continue speaking on this.
Yeah, really. No. I think the title you were gonna use for this episode was Mindless or Masculine, Will Smith's reaction to Chris Rock's. So what do you feel is what's your take on it? Mindful or mindless or masculine or none of the above?
I'm going to say more mindless than masculine for a couple reasons. I think that I think a part of masculinity has to be concerning yourself with what's best for yourself, your family, and the world in general, right? And it seems to me that the best thing for the world in general is for us to create and live in a society where men don't hit other men because they don't like the jokes they tell.
I agree.
That feels like a world that is safer for everyone's wife to live in, not just your wife.
Now, if he hadn't actually got up and slapped Chris Rock and just made the comment from his seat, which was keep my wife's mouth. Yeah, keep my wife's name out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Do you feel that would have been either appropriate, masculine, mindless? Give me an word.
I would have been okay. I would have been not only okay with that, I would have been okay with him interrupting Chris Rock up on the stage to say something. For me, it
was just the physical contact at that point. So for him going up there, that would have been okay. Just not touching him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the initiating of physical violence that is where I had the problem. So him doing something disruptive and quote unquote inappropriate, I would have not only, I would definitely not have had a problem, and I would have probably had the attitude of like, yeah, I get it. I see where he's coming from. Well, that's not completely fair, because I get it. I see where he's coming from is a sentiment that I share. I would like to think that I would not have hit somebody in that scenario, but I might have. And if I did it, that wouldn't make it okay if I chose to do that. But I certainly recognize the feelings that spring up inside you that make you feel like the only thing I can do here is react with violence. It's just, I like to think that we're called to a higher standard than that, and that that's wrong, even though I can completely identify with the impulse to do it.
So I think I read that when Will Smith gave his acceptance speech, he did apologize. Do you remember what he actually said? Or
yeah, I'm not sure about. Let me Google that here in real time and see if he actually apologized to Chris Rock and if he apologized for hitting him.
Yeah. And the other thing I have to say, thinking about this, is, in terms of, I think, a safe bet for Chris Rock here, there is video of Jada kind of laughing at herself after shaving her head. So to me, I would say, yeah, she is got a sense of humor about it, is not seriously upset about it. And then also being in Hollywood and going to these award shows, a lot of it is roasting,
Yeah.
And so between those two things, I feel like, Chris Rock did not even really push the envelope with that joke at all.
Yeah, I
feel like Will Smith's reaction, as well as Jada's reaction about like her disgusted look.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of inconsistent with, what they've already put out there in public.
Yeah. I disagree with you a little bit on that, because I feel like when you're going through something and you choose to be self-deprecating and sort of laugh at yourself about it, that doesn't give someone, I mean, obviously everybody has a blank check to use free speech however they want to. But that doesn't give a blank check to say, okay, since I'm choosing to make fun of myself over this, therefore I give up my right to feel offended by anybody else who makes fun of me. I don't see it that way.
Right. I'm not saying she's giving up her right. I'm not saying she's wrong for feeling that way at all. But what I'm saying is, from Chris Rock's perspective, if he's going to, or as somebody who's a performer in Hollywood and, is going to, make some jokes, and I feel like that was a safer way to go than he could have in a lot of other ways, because of the information that he has available to him. And yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Yeah. I think she has a right. He has, Will Smith has a right to be upset. However, personally, I think, I don't agree with their reaction. I wouldn't have reacted that way. But again, I'm speaking for myself, and it's just my opinion. But I feel like it's a little bit of a 180, a little bit shocking, for them to take such a negative reaction to the point of where, I can understand being maybe a little bit miffed, but Will Smith's a comedian too, and he's done a lot of funny stuff. And so I feel like it was a little bit of over the top reaction from both of them, to think, I mean, again, Chris Rock wasn't making fun of alopecia. It was what she did and not what she has that she didn't have control over, or who she is. it was her decision. Lots of black women, lots of white women wear wigs, wear extensions and everything else, and so it was her decision to shave her head, just like it was Demi Moore's decision to shave her head in G.I. Jane.
Yeah, you said just like in a way that completely is not appropriate in my opinion.
Just like what?
Jada Pinkett did not shave her head just like Demi Moore shaved her head. Demi Moore shaved her head for a paycheck and for a role, and Jada Pinkett did it to deal with an illness that she's experienced.
No. I mean, the character in G.I. Jane, she didn't start out with a shaved head, right?
Right.
Yeah. So she decided, I'm going to shave my head going into this to kind of, for in that movie, in that role, she wanted to be, I guess, present herself in a different way when she went into the boot camp, right? So she chose to shave her head.
Right. But I think the motivation, again, of both Demi Moore, the actress, and whatever the character's name in that forgettable movie happened to be, I think the motivation is completely different than somebody dealing with a medical condition and feeling like their best option for addressing it in a way that, they can cope with it.
Okay. The motivation is different. I agree with that. But I was just basically trying to say that when I said just like, I meant it was a decision that was made that was not mandatory. That was not, that was under that person's control to do that.
Yeah.
Now,
so
I'm not saying, right. I'm not saying it justifies any jokes or anything else like that. It's just, it's a little bit inconsistent in terms of the behavior leading up to the show, and then the reaction, was, I feel like that was a little shocking that it was such a negative reaction from both her and from Will Smith.
Yeah, see, I think you and I disagree on that. I mean, again, I don't excuse the violence part of it, but pretty much anything short of that, I can say, okay, yeah, I get where they're coming from. Like, I get why both of them are so upset about this. Like, they get to feel that. I don't know if I would feel it. I don't know how I would react. I mean, honestly, if the reaction to it was Chris Rock tells the joke, they cut to Will and Jada for a reaction, and Will gets up and goes and hugs her and gives her a kiss, that would have been, I think, a lot better for the world than what we did.
That's instead. Sweet. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent thought and option for sure. Yeah. And I would have liked to seen that too. Sure.
Yeah. But that's not the way they reacted to it. Right. And again, it may very well seem to people who disagree with me like I am just harping on this difference in crossing the line of physical violence. Like, that's the only thing that matters to me. And honestly, it kind of is. It's that's the problem I have with this. Not really anything short of that I would find excusable, and even I could even empathize with it. It's just, when conversation breaks down to the point that physical violence is the answer, that's when things go off the rails at the micro level and the macro level,
Yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and that's where we see the world, take a turn for the worse whenever people say, okay, I can no longer express my feelings or debate this issue with you. Now I have to hit you. And then somebody else hits harder, then somebody else pulls out a knife or a gun, and then somebody else decides to drop a nuclear bomb. Like, that's the progression of how these things go when you're willing to say, okay, enough conversation, let's start hitting people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the difference, the tough part here is there was no conversation to begin with. Like, Will Smith just went up there and, and so it'd be different if, I mean, I'm not saying it would be different or necessary, but that violence would be necessary. But if Will Smith first said, leave my wife's name out of your mouth, and Chris Rock continued, I mean, I'm not still saying that justifies violence, but that's not how it happened. And it was just an overreaction, like you said, to something that there was no back and forth. There was no communication. Right. So I think that's a fundamental issue, is that we've got short attention spans. We have a lot less patience these days. And so because of that, it makes communication a lot more difficult. And, I feel like that the communication that Will Smith chose was not appropriate.
Yeah. So I guess overall, I would say I'm disappointed that it happened. It's obviously compelling because we're talking about it. So there is that. It does make me, and I've seen some like not super A-list well-known comedians, like people whose names that you might not recognize on Twitter that I think are very funny, sharing concerns like, okay, so now some idiot at some comedy club in the middle of the Midwest is going to think that, if his wife starts running her mouth during my show and I make a joke about her, his move is to get up and slap me.
Yeah.
And that concerns me too. I mean,
for sure,
as people I know that I consider friends that are still doing comedy, and just people that I looked up to as artists that I really appreciate their work. It's like the idea that that's another thing that's going to be going through their mind before they tell a joke about somebody. That's a bummer. I don't like that.
That's great thought. I didn't think about that, but that it is really, and coming from Will Smith, who has played some cool, calm, collected characters.
It's weird that we hold him to a standard because of that, but
that's what we know of him.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Same thing, in terms of, our opinions of a lot of companies that we work with or that we deal with on a daily basis. It's not the corporate executives that we're thinking of. It's the customer service people that we work with, that we deal with. Those are the front lines. And that's the impression we get of a lot of different companies and organizations and businesses. So the product that he's putting out, his roles, that may not be the way he is at home at all, or on it, but those roles that he's, choosing to advertise his, who he is, that kind of starts to, you kind of think of him in that same way. What I want to ask you was, did you find the apology online?
I did. Yes. Okay. I did find the apology online, and I find it really lacking. Read it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Please read.
So here's the part that, as far as I can tell, this is it. I want to be an ambassador of that kind of love and care and concern, referring to the role of Richard Williams. I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees. And that was the end of it from what I could see.
Was Chris Rock nominated for anything?
Even if he was, that's not.
No. I'm just curious. I mean,
I don't believe so, but let me check.
Okay. Because that says something to me.
I'm just going to Wikipedia for a list of awards and nominations received by Chris Rock. I do not see, and I don't see that he's ever been nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty clear that he was not apologizing to Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And that seems like a bit of a misstep and a demonstration that, how sorry can he be if he's not apologizing to the guy that he hit?
Right.
So there's another take on this that I've seen frequently online, which I don't really agree with. It's basically people saying, okay, well, when it came out that Will Smith and his wife, him and Jada, don't have a traditional marriage, and apparently they're both polyamorous, and so they have an open marriage, and she talks about, I believe she's talked about a relationship she had with someone outside the marriage with another celebrity, and I don't believe Will Smith has commented on it. So people are saying, oh, it was okay when his wife was having sex with somebody else. He wasn't willing to hit anybody then, but now he's willing to go up and hit a comic. And it's like, we don't know.
Now it's getting complicated.
Right. And we don't know exactly. We don't know everything that went into the reaction that we saw last night. It could have been about a lot more than just the joke Chris Rock told. And, I don't think if he went out and beat the crap out of this guy that she had a relationship with, that suddenly makes it okay for him to get up and slap Chris Rock. I don't see that the two are necessarily related. And I think it's that just feels like kind of a lazy take, to say
that there's so much information that's missing from both scenarios at that point. You can't.
Yeah. And I feel like people have, and hey, we may have even been guilty of it for the last few minutes that we've been talking about it. People have a desire to simplify things and put them into a context that they feel like they completely understand everything that went into it, so that they can have an opinion to say, this is wrong and I would never do that, or this is right and I would have done the same thing. That desire to oversimplify goes after, it attacks all of us including you and me talking right now.
Of course. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. But I'm going to put a little disclaimer on the fact that I agree with you that, violence is rarely rarely the answer, but it's definitely in my mind not the answer when other methods haven't even been tried.
Right.
I feel like he rushed right into this rather than trying to communicate, in some way, or make a joke about Chris Rock, or, whatever that might be, or just let him know, hey, that was, not cool, man. Match that level of communication. And I feel like it's somebody who, again, has presented as a very, played a lot of roles where he's a thinking man. He's calm, cool, and collected. It's a little bit more shocking to see him take that step. And, as we've talked about, masculinity is about having the power, and the mindfulness is knowing when to use it and being smart about when to use it. And clearly I don't think Will Smith was masculine in that.
Yeah.
That reaction.
I would agree with you.
I mean, he was a classic example of toxic masculinity.
Correct. And, I had a thought the other day, how I'm really starting to appreciate all the people talking about toxic positivity. And
I have not heard this. Help me out. What is this?
So toxic positivity is, as I understand it, it's this promoting of the reaction of, just keep your chin up, everything's going to be okay. And, sort of the, when someone's dealing with depression, just tell them, hey, you just need some sunshine. You just need to go for a walk. Everything will be fine. Or even worse, what do you have to be depressed about? That kind of reaction. And I enjoy the discussion because I feel like it does map very closely to the discussion of toxic masculinity, which every time I hear somebody talk about toxic masculinity or toxic positivity, I just want to swap out the word toxic for performative. Like, this is an example of someone performing what they think positivity is supposed to look like, or performing what they think masculinity is supposed to look like, and not actual positivity or actual masculinity.
That's great. And that's more specific. Talking about the last rule from Jordan Peterson, right, is be specific in your speech. I like that, Charles. That's really great. That definitely helps me. Yeah, because toxic to me,
what is
poisonous? It's a vague term, right? Especially when it comes to something that's so specific, such as masculinity or positivity,
right? And when do we see men at their most harmful and their most dangerous? In my opinion, it's when they're doing what they think they're supposed to do to look like a man. Not when they're behaving authentically, not when they're behaving in a way that allows them to be open about what they're feeling or experiencing, but when they say, I'm going to put aside what I'm actually feeling and what I'm actually experiencing, and I'm going to do the thing that I think the world's expecting of me right now. And that's when stuff goes real sideways real fast and people get hurt.
So when that happens, do you think they are allowing more of the emotional side of themselves to take over, or do you feel like that's, or is it more of a mental type of scheming, planning type of reaction, or could it be both? I mean,
I don't think that, a toxic man is a more emotional man. I think the opposite is true. I think a toxic man is a man who can't feel and manage his emotions and express his emotions. And so he sort of defaults to this behavior of, okay, instead of feeling what I'm feeling, what do I need to put out there that will represent what I'm supposed to be feeling? In my case, when I've been guilty of it, it's been a matter of like, okay, something's bothering me. Usually it's, in almost every case, it's anxiety that's a result of an unmet need. And I feel like, okay, I can't openly express that I'm going through anxiety as a result of an unmet need. So how would a man who doesn't have any needs behave right now? And then I try to play that role so that everybody thinks I'm fine and everything's cool, when it's the exact opposite. And so as a result, I come across as a defensive, cold prick instead of the person that I really am in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I see it from my own experience, at least.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, I don't know how to wrap things up. I don't want to wrap things up where I'm saying shame on Will Smith, because I don't feel like shame on anybody is my job. I get where he's coming from. I wish he wouldn't have handled it that way for both, for his case, for Chris Rock's case, for his wife's. I think this all around, this is not a great thing that happened for anybody, including the world in general. But hopefully it'll provide us an opportunity to learn from it and talk about it in a way that good things will happen. I mean, that's really all we can hope for.
So put yourself in Will Smith's shoes for a second right now.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know and wanting to issue a second apology.
Interesting.
What would you say?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think any effective apology needs to cover certain ground. And I've gotten a lot of this from Sam Harris's podcast, where he's talked about the same thing. I think for an effective apology, you have to say, here's what was going through my mind when I did what I did. Here's what happened to change my perspective on what I did. And here's a very concrete reason why I will never engage in this behavior again. And I think any apology, publicly or privately, to anybody that doesn't include those things isn't really an apology.
I like it. That's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah. So I guess that's what he has to do. He has to say, here's why it hurt enough for me to do what I did. And here's the discussion I had, or the feeling that I had afterward that makes me realize what I did was wrong. And here's how I'm going to keep myself in check in the future to never engage in this kind of behavior again. So anything short of that, I mean, just, I want to apologize to the Academy and my fellow nominees. That's not an apology.
It wasn't. It was half-assed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read that something like Denzel came over to him and kind of whispered in his ear and said some things to him.
Denzel Washington strikes me as a very wise man from what I've seen and heard of him so far. So I'd be real interested.
Is that based on his roles that he's played, or is that based on things that he says publicly?
It's based on memes I've seen on Instagram quoting something that he said that he may never have said in the first place.
Yeah, I know. I like him too because of that. Yeah, he does seem like a wise man. Yeah,
some of his acceptance speeches for awards that he's received, they really do kind of communicate, okay, this guy gets it. This guy, there's a deep well of wisdom there that is underneath the guy who's playing other people for a living.
Yeah.
That's the impression I've gotten of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would love to hear what he had to say to him. I mean, part of me says we're better off for that remaining private and never coming out. But the other part of me is like, oh man, I wonder what he said.
Right. I mean, but in all fairness, it didn't really make a difference in terms of the apology, at least not currently.
Not immediately. Yeah. But, I mean, there is a chance that this is something that is going to stew inside of Will Smith and sort of grind on him over the next day or two that will make him decide, okay, I need to go do what used to be the Oprah interview. I don't know who does the important apology interview now. That Oprah's kind of out of the game. I don't know who that is, but it may prompt him to go do a sit down where he can, talk about his background, his relationship, his anger, stuff like that. And maybe people can learn from it. That'd be great, but that's up to him. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hope he does follow up with something a little bit more significant than that apology.
Yeah.
Just for the fact that, as you mentioned, I didn't even think about this, is I love stand-up comedy. And I love, live performances. And if those performers now are inhibited in some way, because it doesn't even have to be comedy. It could be, some other performance that, some artistic that perhaps offends somebody,
right,
in some way. And for them to feel like they're justified in terms of, the reaction to that, instead of walking out of the event, is to get up there and disrupt the performance and physically attack somebody. I mean, I think at this point, if Will Smith doesn't do something, hopefully some of these live performances, these comedy venues, maybe start issuing just some reminders for people to be chill, as part of the announcements, as just as like, hey, turn off your cell phones, is violence is not tolerated here. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law if you were to do anything. And it's sad that needs to be done. But I feel like after this, seeing that performance and considering how many people respect Will Smith and, love him in his movies, it's not a far cry, not a far leap for other people to think that this is acceptable behavior.
I agree. Yeah. That is troubling. And, thankfully I've been to a lot of comedy shows, and I've never seen a heckler like get up out of their seat and start stand up and start yelling at a comic. I'm sure it happens. I know that violent things, sort of like this have even happened at comedy shows, but I've never seen it, and I hope I never do. And I hope that if it does happen, not only the club security, but the other audience members are going to not tolerate, people getting aggressive with the performers. I mean, I know I wouldn't. If somebody got up in the back of the room and started walking toward the comedian after standing up and yelling at them, and I was between them, I wouldn't just sit in my seat. And perhaps to my detriment, I wouldn't just sit in my seat.
Right. But then again, you don't know what that person is carrying.
I know.
Anything. You don't know what that person knows in terms of some sort of martial arts, some sort of, drunken rage. I'll be honest with you, just the way, Peterson talks about how, if we were in Nazi Germany, we would not be the ones to hide Anne Frank.
Right.
I don't know if I'd be the one to stand up, because I'm not also, you may be trained in, some martial arts and things like that. I'm not, and there are security guards, hopefully, or there's security there that does have some sort of training that could handle the situation better than I could. I don't think I would. I don't think I'd get up and stop somebody, to be honest with you, unless,
you may misunderstand me. I don't credit this with virtue or heroism. I had a similar experience in a movie theater once where there was a dispute that looked like it was about to break out, and I stood up and I started heading that way, and then it de-escalated before anything happened. Thankfully, it was about, it was right after movie theaters started doing like assigned seatings where you could pick what chairs you wanted, and then there was a father and daughter that had come to sit, and there were a group of like older teenagers in their seats, all boys, and they started like arguing about the fact that they were in the wrong seats, and I just got angry about it, like pretty angry. And like, I was like, okay, I'm going to head over there. So if something starts happening, I'll be in a place to do something about it. And I don't think it was motivated out of, I need to be the hero or I'm standing up for the right thing to do. I just got pissed. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And now I might get to do something about it, which again is not a healthy way to be. And but I was able to sort of hide behind some sort of righteousness about it, like I was standing up for the right thing. But I'm not a violent guy, and as we've said, I've spoken against initiating violence, but I'm also no pacifist where I'm not in the position that violence is never the answer. Sometimes when somebody else gets violent, the only answer is to be more effectively violent than they are.
So was your inkling to, if something were to happen and maybe something did, words were said, your first reaction, would it have been to communicate verbally with them, or would it have been?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless punches started being thrown before I was able to get into the situation, and then it would have been, trying to restrain somebody or, ideally the best thing to do is put somebody in a rear naked choke so that they go to sleep and you don't have to deal with them anymore. But when you're dealing with a group of multiple people, the time it takes to do that is not often the best
strategy for
sure. So I don't know what would have happened, but I just know that this guy and his daughter are just trying to get to their seats to enjoy a movie, and somebody is disrupting that and being like really obstinate and aggressive about it. And I was like, okay, I feel something inside me that's saying, it's fight or flight time. And in that particular case, for whatever reason, fight was winning the argument of the day.
Yeah, hey, that's admirable for sure.
I don't know that it is. I mean, because part of me is like, it's none of my business. And, I'm not the kind of guy to go looking for fights, and bad things, horrible things can happen.
I don't consider that you looking for a fight. I think that's, to me, I take that as you just wanting to defend what's right and defending, potentially, the father and daughter from basically.
I hope you're right, but the best part of me is the part of me that doubts my own motivations and doubts where I'm coming from on stuff like that, and wants to say, okay, how much is this actually about you versus how much is it about you doing the right thing? How much is it about you getting to feel like you're the guy that does the right thing versus actually caring for what's right? Because look, as we've discussed on the podcast, I'm a guy with some narcissistic tendencies, and so if I want to do something about really fixing that or addressing it or making myself healthier, then part of what I have to do is say, okay, how much am I making the situation about me and taking actions that makes me get to feel the way I like to feel about myself versus, doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. So I'm very comfortable with second guessing my motivations, because I think it's making me a better person.
For sure. Yeah. Thinking through things more than once is definitely a beneficial trait to have. So yeah, man. Anything else you feel we should get into on this one?
No, I think I've pretty much covered. I'm looking forward to the idea of cutting this one up and uploading it and releasing it today as a special edition, because Rule 5 already came out this morning. Rule 5, your kids are bumming me out.
I love that title.
Yeah, I do too. And so I hope people don't feel like they're being overloaded with 3 episodes this week.
Oh my God.
When something like this that is so public and so related to masculinity happens, I feel like you and I have both a privilege and a responsibility to jump in and mix it up and talk about it.
I agree. This is your idea this morning. I thought it was great for us to go with this. Very, very topical at the time. And I definitely enjoyed going through this with you, having this mental exercise.
Me too. So we'll once you get the video and the audio uploaded, we will I'll edit it together this morning as quickly as I can before I head out to my dance lesson this afternoon, and then I'll see you for our group dance class tonight. So it'll be
a dance marathon for Charles today.
It'll be a lot of podcasting, editing, and dancing on a Monday, and then I also got some work stuff sprinkled in that I'm trying to get done. So it's going to be a busy day, and we'll talk again soon. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, man. All right. We'll
take it easy.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you liked the episode, or you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook. Remember, fellas, don't act masculine, be masculine.